It's the end of Season 3 of FAS TV, and we've taken a look back at some of the highlights from our farmers and crofters, sharing their knowledge and experiences of their sheep enterprises across Scotland.
Aberfields are very accustomed to mob grazing, which is important for us, and they survive well on a forage-based diet because we don't really feed hardly any concentrate these days. Resting the grass in the winter for probably 90 days is what we try and do. That's really helped the ground. The inside lambing is predominantly, well, it's all gimmers and any other weak ewes and all triplets. Costs are being things that we buy or purchase, one being the high one being fertiliser and the other one being concentrates. Having the Aberfield as a breed of sheep has been good to reduce costs because they survive well on forage, therefore we don't need the concentrates. And what we've also done is we now make our silage bang on midsummer's week, if not the week after. So we're making it when the sugars are highest in the crop. We're getting really high protein, really high ME, therefore that takes us through the winter without any costs.
Once the whole lambing cycle's finished, we're happy with everything, I'll start mobbing yows and lambs up. We tend to graze our twin mobs in the region of 220 to 250 yows. It just suits our system, it suits the size of the fang. It's enough for me to bring that mob in on my own, sort through the lambs if I'm needing to treat anything. That's sort of a good size, and we'll take the single mobs up to about 350. We had one lot there, 370. For the size of paddocks we've got, again, size of handling facilities, that's sort of the size of mobs we run. Keep your management system simple, like, well, once a ewe lamb is born, she'll be given a double colour of that year. That tag then stays with her for life. So if she ever loses a tag, we buy a like-for-like tag, it gets replaced back into, so she never loses that original identity. Yeah, we run a different colour for every year. Probably my favourite management tool that we use is a set of ear notches. So throughout the year, if I ever have a problem, for example a lame yow, she'll get a clip out of the back of her left ear. That just tells me, right, this yow, she's had an issue. We then sort it. If 4 weeks, 5 weeks down the line, she's still got an issue, she'll get another tag behind her ear. That then means she's a cull. So as soon as she falls out of the lambing system, I suppose, once she's spayed her lambs, she'll be fattened up and she'll be down the road.
We were to change the policy and take off every triplet lamb. So left every yow with 2 lambs and took off the third one. We found that by doing this, it gave the yows a chance to recover better. It also let the lambs that she kept thrive. In terms of yow condition, we found that the yows have held their condition a lot better, and that also there's been fewer cases of mastitis after we've started taking off the third lamb. We're really strict with our pets. When they start on the machine, we take the start date and then 5 weeks. They get 5 weeks on the milk and then it's hard and fast. We've done this before we got the machine, we did this, and we found that that was the best case scenario, was just to cut them off at 5 weeks. And they always get hard feed alongside the milk, so they're kind of getting used to that as well. The pet lambs, we don't put them outside. We used to a few years back, but we decided it was better and they finished a lot quicker for them to stay in the shed.
The lamb's between 3 and 5 kilos when it's born. It's far higher chances of survival than if it's say below 3 kilos, and quite often with triplets you will get issues with small lambs, and those lambs are far less likely to thrive, again if they're competing with their 2 other siblings for milk and colostrum. So withdrawing one lamb potentially increases the chances of not only the lambs surviving, but also the chances of those lambs actually growing at a rate that would be acceptable for the production on the farm. if we can focus on that lamb being nourished from, say, day 2, day 3, be it on a milk machine or whatever, then if they're getting adequate nutrition from the milk on the machine, then they will be growing at a desired rate. Their chances of disease transmission are far reduced. So from that respect, you know, there's no risk of that lamb failing to get adequate milk in the first 3 or 4 days, which are really the golden time for making sure that we get lamb survival. You know, most lamb losses occur kind of a week pre-lambing through to a couple of weeks post-lambing, and that's really the time you want to focus your attention on. To summarise, in terms of 3 main pieces of advice, the first one would, the whole thing still revolves around hygiene around that birthing period. So if you can reduce the disease challenge by, having lambs born into clean pens, a clean environment, clean teats on the ewe, that reduces the challenge massively on the newborn lambs, so their chances of disease are reduced. Adequate passive transfer of colostrum would be the second point. We know that adequate passive transfer will dictate the lamb's performance throughout its life, so the first kind of 2 or 3 hours will dictate that and map out that lamb's, the rest of its life. So that would be another major point. So again, investment in time to make sure the lamb has fed. If there's not adequate colostrum on the ewe, then it would be a case of supplementing those with either a ewe that's got surplus colostrum on a single, or potentially like a colostral replacer. My third point would be probably ewe condition. So getting your ewe condition right pre-lambing, ensuring, again, probably with the knowledge of scanning in mind, your singles and triplets can be fed with the view that they will mobilise some back fat, but they're not going to be in a position where they won't milk when they're, and also it allows the yow the energy reserves and to milk when the lambs are born and she goes on to rear the lambs.
Composite breed is basically, I don't want to say a mongrel or a mutt, but it's sort of that way inclined. It's a mixture of breeds, almost like a hybrid breed, that you combine 3 or 4 different breeds, depending on certain traits, mix them all together and come up with this composite crossbreed that sort of suits a lot of factors. The benefits of our Highlander, which is a composite breed, they're a lot more prolific for a start. We're scanning at 218%. The fertility seems to be a lot better with them. We seem to be scanning obviously 218%, but then at top in time, sort of into the second cycle, you're only really sort of left with 4 or 5% that needs to be topped. Everything's pretty much lambing, about 96–97% lambing in the first 2 cycles, which I think is pretty decent for what they are. Very, very milky. Obviously, with a scan of 218, you get quite a lot of triplets, but they seem to be, sort of 80–90% of them are rearing triplets. We might get a smaller lamb in the back end, but we still manage to sell it at a really good profit. But the mothering ability is the main thing for us. Obviously, because I land them outside, we have to tag and record at birth. So the fact that I can walk up to a set of newborn lambs, stand there and scan the yow with the Zion as I'm tagging the lambs is almost unheard of. So it's, that is one of the main sort of benefits that we do see. And obviously the efficiency side, we're not feeding any concentrate. It's grass all year round, soon to go into a stubble turnip for the winter this year as a trial. And for the last 2 years that we've had them, we've never wormed or fluked them yet. So that's obviously, as part of FECPAC, which we're using as well to test regularly, coinciding with that, it is showing a lot of benefits.
Off the back of the project, we realised that we had triclobendazole resistance. So even though we knew triclobendazole had an impact, we were obviously trying to minimise our use before, but with the testing and then the efficacy testing, we found that we had resistance. So we were using a chemical that was having a negative impact on invertebrates, and it wasn't actually helping the livestock. So there's no point carrying on with that method. So now we're carrying on with testing, working out when we've got a fluke risk, only treating when we've got high burden. And then using a chemical that we know works. So even though we're still having to use a chemical that will have an impact on dung invertebrates, we're treating animals that need treating at the right time of year, minimising that usage by not treating them at the wrong times of year, and then also reducing the risk of creating resistance from the other drugs by not using it at the wrong times of year. and being more accurate, weighing the animals before we treat them, all these sort of things that are kind of becoming more and more normal, but in the past were quite unusual things to do.
Historically, what we've done there in the past is treat at a certain time of year with certain products, and that's really not sustainable. So this is really about trying to time the treatments better, and then once the treatment goes in, make sure it's worked. So the egg counting is a sort of cheap and cheerful entry-level way of doing that, and Gillian's a real expert at that. The ideal combination is to do an egg count on the day of treatment and then 3 weeks later and see what's happened to that egg count. But for the fecal test, we typically recommend 10 or 12, but with the egg count can be made into a composite, so a single test and you get a single readout. That's really the message, is about using the available diagnostic tests, understanding what they tell you, but using available diagnostic tests to tell you when's the peak time to treat, what's the right product to use, and prove that it's worked. If we treat too much, too often with products that don't work very well, then we're going to lose the very few active ingredients that we've got, and that's going to make livestock farming very difficult in a fluky environment.
If other farmers are having fluke issues, I would definitely say test your animals, and also test for resistance to certain chemicals as well. Triclobendazole, I think a lot of people are going to have issues with that now, just because of way people have been managing that drug and using it. So definitely test, and then if you can avoid certain areas of the farm, have a look at the farm, look at the ground, and if there's particularly wet, boggy areas, just try and avoid grazing it if you can. It's not always possible, but definitely test. Especially with the new technologies that are coming out, it's very easy to get quick results now as well. So we've been using this FECPAC machine, which our vets is running for us. So we can get the samples sent to them, we can get a result in the afternoon now, so we can have them gathered in the morning, and we know by the afternoon whether we need to dose them or not. So if they don't need dose, they can go back out, and then if not, we can dose them and then put them away. But yeah, definitely test for, if you think you've got resistance issues as well, definitely speak to your vets and do some resistance testing for that as well.